you're welcome to this evening, and I just want to talk about why strong parent-child relationship matters. One of the key reasons why this matters is because the parent-child bond and relationship forms as the blueprint for the brain of your child or of your children. Most times we have children and then you find them being clingy, always on you as a mom or as the dad. And sometimes as adults, we are like, can you go sit in one place? Oh, I need my privacy. Mommy needs to do this. Daddy needs to do this. It's actually a way of that child trying to self-regulate, and as a child they're not able to do it on their own. So what they do at that point is that they attach themselves to their parents. We have secure attachment patterns and we have insecure attachment patterns. I'll go into that a little bit more later. So when, as a parent, a child perceives that you're warm, responsive, and you care about their needs, it shapes how your child or how your children manage stress, emotions, and this builds up on how they have to handle relationships later on in their lives. Okay, so another reason why a strong parent-child relationship matters is because it forms some sort of secure base for that child. So for your child's confidence to grow, in a case whereby they're able to explore, learn, and take healthy risks, it actually starts from the family. It starts from their developmental stages as a child. And there are several research and bodies of work that back up that fact, actually, that scientific fact. So when you have a child that grows up into a young adult and is super confident, is able to learn, take healthy risks, just know that there's been an amazing caregiver down the line in while they were growing up that was able to offer a secure base for that child or those children. Also, developing a strong parent-child relationship matters so much because it helps create some sort of buffer against hardship. Like I said, I'm a mental resilience practitioner, and resilience is really what separates everyone almost on the same level of circumstances and situation come out of it stronger than the other person. So we can all be put on in a particular place in the same leveling field. However, you find some sets of people thriving more than the other sets of people. So it just goes to show that the resilience that has been built over time, from childhood into teenagehood into adulthood, then helps you, protect yourself against toxic stress. Now, what we can see is that this buffer, as a parent, you're the first buffer for that child. Okay. And you are the one that would help that child navigate any toxic stress, any challenges that the child experiences while growing up under your care. And finally, one of the reasons why building a strong parent-child relationship matter is because it forms some sort of template for the future for your child and your children. Early relationship patterns shape friendships, romantic relationships, and future parenting. Okay. My next slide is speaking about attachment, trust, and emotional safety. I spoke about attachment as a stress regulation system. We have the secure attachment patterns and we have insecure attachment patterns. So there's a quadrant actually that shows how insecure attachment patterns have heightened anxiety more than secure attachment patterns. So children borrow from calm adults' nervous system until they can regulate their own. There are situations that you find yourself as an adult and probably you've had a hectic day, just like I've had today. You've had a hectic day, you're back from work, and your children are all around you. You have chores around, you have a couple of routines that you have to go through in the evening, and you feel this heightened pressure and stress and anxiety. As an adult that has been able to build yourself, your resilience and have strategies to cope in situations like that. You find yourself probably breathing. I'll use myself as an example. Before this call, I had to soak in the bath. So it's one of my rituals when I find myself stressed, after the day. I have a I have a baby actually that's just under 1 year old. So after my work, I was really stressed. I just put the bathtub in, put some bubbles. I went in and I saw that my under 1 year old came towards the bathroom and wanted to come into the bathtub with me. And then once that child came into the bathtub with me, we both laid down there and I could see that my child was calm. So at that point, mommy that was stressed a couple of minutes ago is in the bathtub and I'm cool and I'm calm and I'm self-regulating myself and I'm feeling better. That transferred into my baby that was a bit cranky and a bit crying. When he came into the bathtub with me, instantly he borrowed a bit of my calm at that point and he was able to regulate himself rather. Another attachment, trust, and emotional safety point that I want to make is that difficult behavior is often a signal. I mentioned working patients face to face with parents and patients in the mental health space in the UK. And one behavior, or rather, one thing that is prevalent in what we have to deal with every day is how parents advise us on how their children marks most of their behaviors. So a child that is obviously displaying traits and characteristics of autism or ADHD or any other mental health challenges that we can think about would behave in their natural state while they are home with you, and then would max it in school. And the reverse can be the case as well. So they can be themselves when they're with their friends in school and actually display who they are and come back home to max. So the dynamics can actually change. And what would allow a child on max safely is if they find that the space that they are in, the adults that they are under their care at that moment, is offering some sort of emotional safety. And there's this safety just around your home is not toxic, and all of that. You see that the behavior of the child is able to open up more than an adverse situation. So many behaviors are bid for connection and a stress response. Okay. Another thing is that safety is felt. It's not just physical. A child can be physically safe, but still feel emotionally unsafe if care is unpredictable. Now, how can care be unpredictable? That's really from a parent that let me use the right explanation. Okay, so there's this system that we use when you spot distress. So when you spot distress within yourself, a colleague, a friend, your child, your children, the first thing that you have to do is that you need to listen. So listening stops distress. And the stop itself has an acronym. S is for spotting the distress. T is for talking about it and inviting that child to, speak more on what you've noticed. O is that you offer care, comfort, and empathy. P is when you're able to signpost your child to professional support. If you feel that your child is struggling seriously, you can signpost to the GP. If your child is a teenager and is struggling, you can have coaches that you can signpost them to and get professional help basically. And then S stands for self-regulating. So if you listen actively through showing general acceptance, being genuine and showing empathy, the child knows that, okay, this person actually cares about what I'm going through. And they know when that care is not predictable. They know when today you are a safe space and tomorrow it's like, get out of my sight or something like that. So we as parents, as we try to regulate ourselves, we have to remember, especially if you have young children like myself, you have to remember that these children are actually getting their own self-regulation from me. So I think it's even harder for parents that have younger children than teenagers, in the sense that there's, as a teenager, they've already gotten the development from, I think it's age 2, yes, from age 2. So from age 2, they've gotten that development. They can carry on their own as teenagers, and but they still rely on you. There are different strategies to handle them. But for the younger children, if you have younger children at home, you have to understand that this is the foundation. This is it. This is when they're able to learn those strategies from you. So if you as a parent, you don't have that strategy to self-regulate yourself, you're not able to maintain a predictable flow of safety at home. Yes, we are humans. We have our down times, we have our up times. However, when you look at the charts, it should really not be so unpredictable, because at that point it causes a lot of distress for your child. Okay, so let me move along. I'm just going to speak about our migration journey and how it adds another layer of stress to everything that we have to deal with. Children and you as the parents, you often adapt to new culture at different speeds. Okay, and this can create tension. If you notice, when you moved to the country, if you came in with your children, you as an adult might have just adapted faster to the climb. You maybe just, you've built that adaptability skill. But for your child, you find out that they're struggling in school. It takes them a longer time to adapt, to make friends. This is that added layer that the migration journey has added on. So we need to pay attention to that. Okay. So there's also other underlying vulnerabilities. It could be loss of extended family member, or non-existent community support that they've been used to in a different climate. And they're coming to a place where your village is almost non-existent. You're trying to find that community again. Thankfully, we have Afrikindness. So sometimes this shows that you can lean on the community, which is an essential part of building resilience. So resilience technically is not about saying you as the mother or as the father, you have to be strong all the time. No, you're human. You go off. You have downtimes. You have times that you're happy. Okay, so that's why we say when you're building resilience skills, having a supportive community, intentionally curate it for yourself. Good thing you found yourself in Afrikindness. That's an amazing first step. So you need to know that the community would help you. That's why you're here today. Many people are probably back from home from work. You might be stressed, but now you're in a community that's talking about how we can, survive and thrive and build resilience. So that's you drawing strength from the community that you found yourself. Okay. So that's that on the migration and how it adds an added layer. I'll come back to why I referenced the migration journey. Let me just move along quickly. So I'm just going to talk to you about tips on how you can communicate with your children on different levels. Like I said, if you have younger children, there's a different way to communicate with them. And if you have older children, which are teenagers, there's a different way to communicate with them. Okay. So in practice, when you're communicating with younger children, you need to, one, get on their physical level. There's this technique with there's this listening technique called SOLER. So SOLER. So the S is how you need to adjust your posture and speak when you want to actually allow somebody open up to you. Your sitting posture actually matters a lot. This is adults I'm talking about now. So your sitting posture matters a lot. We usually recommend that you sit towards the 5 o'clock angle. You're not staring into the eyes of the adult or the person you're speaking to, because that will make them close certain doors. So you should aim to have eye contact, however, not just staring at the person. So now, this same skill, however, with communicating with your younger children, we are tall, we are bigger, we are huge, and your child comes to you and you want to have a discussion with your child, and you are there, your hands are folded, you're probably tapping your feet, and you're like, okay, what do you want to talk about? I'm listening, but you're like this. The child just blocks off and would not communicate with you. So your posture matters so much. And in this case, we actually are supposed to bring ourselves down. to their height. We're supposed to bring ourselves down physically to their level, give our full attention, okay? Even if it's briefly, because I know we have conflicting priorities. However, we should carve out that time when we want to talk to our children. Secondly, we should be able to name the emotions out loud to build emotional vocabulary. When younger children are growing up, I'll use myself as an example. When I see that my son is trying to throw a tantrum, he's cranky, and I've scolded him, when we want to have the discussion about why I scolded him, I don't just say, I don't just come down to his level and say, oh, hi, I want us to talk about what happened today and this and that and that. And maybe I use evasive words or sentences. No, I name it. I name the emotion. I'm like, mommy got upset with you because you did this, because you acted in this way, and I want us to talk about it. And I realized that 2 to 3 years, I think I started that when he was about 2 years old. And it got to a point that he's 5 now. It got to a point that I would be going off, but because of how I've trained him unknowingly with the way I talk about the emotions, with the way I teach him about breathing techniques, he comes to me and he's like, Mom, are you having a rough day? I'm like, yes. And he's like, okay, Mommy, do you want to breathe? Can we do box breathing? And I'm like, the day he said it the first time, I was like, oh my goodness. And he's like, all right, breathe, Mommy. We're going to do it 4 times. We're going to do it 5 times. I'm like, oh my God, he's listening, he's learning. And that's just to say that at that tender age, the way we try to regulate ourselves as adults, they are learning from us. They are taking it off. If you have an argument with your partner, which would definitely happen, talk about it. When they see that you and your partner has, gone off, usually, ideally, you should have those arguments away from the children. However, sometimes that's not the case. If we're being, factual, it could happen anywhere. It could happen while you're driving. You try your best to contain it. However, these children can see that, oh, mommy and daddy has this friction. And that's why we always say, when you're trying to make amends with your partner, the fact that your child saw when you both went off, it's great to make amends in front of them, because they are watching. They should be able to know that, okay, so in friendships, in relationships, it's okay to actually go off. It's okay to come back and talk about it. It's okay to apologize. And I'm happy with where we are as millennial parents. The boomer what do you call it? Baby boomer generation. There was a lot of things with that generation that was really, really, really off. A lot of us grew up without our parents telling us, I'm sorry, I overreacted, I shouldn't have behaved this way, I'm wrong. And, we didn't grow up, most of us didn't grow up, hearing things like that. So now we have the younger children. We should make it a habit to say, I'm sorry, I was wrong, I overreacted, I should have done this in a better way. Now, at that point, you are naming the emotions and you are building the emotional and mental resilience of your child. Thirdly, let me go on because I can talk about this forever. Bear with me. So thirdly, we need to listen, reflect before we jump into problem solving. It is very, very important. When we, always regularly show that mommy's coming to save you, daddy's coming to save you, I'm here, I'll fix it, I'm Mr. Fixer. We might be, helping, we might think that we're helping the children at that point. However, in the long run, we are not. We're acting as a buffer, fine and good, but we should listen, reflect, and afterwards bring up problem solving strategies. And in that case, you're not saying, hey, Junior, I'm going to help you fix this. No, you can say something along the lines like, we discussed this earlier on. I've thought about it. That's to show the thought process which that child would emulate. So going forward, they're able to absorb new language, culture faster than even we as parents often expect. We need to keep talking to them in our Languages, if you have native tongues, if you have native languages, please keep talking to them in those languages too as well, because bilingual children build stronger identity and family closeness. So when you speak to your child about something that you've listened to them on, you've reflected, and you're coming back with problem solving strategies, that is giving them the framework, literally. So when they're growing and they're experiencing things, they don't just jump into conclusions. They absorb it, they think about it, they give it a thought, and they are able to then make better informed, clear-headed decisions. Okay. And I'll just quickly move on to strategies in communicating with teenagers, because we're done with the young children. I don't have teenagers. Okay. So this is just like theoretical knowledge. I don't have practical examples with this one. However, working with teenagers, young adults in my day-to-day job, this is actually in practice the best ways to communicate with a teenager. If you want to have that communication, most times it's not about saying it in the same environment or in the same space that the emotion went off in. Okay, so say you and your teenager had a friction in the house. We usually recommend that you let things lay and maybe go for a walk with your child later on. You can delay having that discussion till when maybe you are driving, you're cooking, or you're doing something else that would distract you and your teenager from that emotion, that environment that the emotion went off in. So walking is actually the best one. I love a lot. So when you want to try walking, why we say that is because at that point you're not looking directly to your teenager. You're not saying we want to talk, and you're sitting down in their bedroom and you're like, okay, I want us to talk. At that point, they're like, oh my God, what have I done? They just close up, and you would not get much responses. Even if you use open-ended questions, you most likely not get much responses from them. However, if you just go out and say, oh, I think we should go take a stroll, come with me, I want to go buy something. And then while you're working side by side with your teenager, you start having discussions. Once in a while, as you're working, you just throw, glances at them. That's trying to build that, those glances, that eye contact without necessarily staring into them. Okay. Another thing is to lead with curiosity. In the coaching practice, from my experience so far, we help our clients not by identifying or fixing their lives for them. We're not telling them what is wrong. However, we lead with curiosity. So we ask more questions in the coaching field. We say things around, what was that like for you? Allow your child or your teenager open up more, do more of the listening. We always say that silences and pauses are very, very healthy. If that child doesn't want to talk when you've asked that question, what was it like for you? Don't rush off in closing up that conversation and be like, oh, okay, you don't want to talk, I'll probably talk about that later to you. No, you're wanting to establish that communication bond between you and your teenager. So when you ask the question, be patient. Try your best to do it when you're free. Be patient, relax, and listen to them. If they don't talk, just enjoy the silence. And afterwards, you can go ahead to say something around, can you tell me how that made you feel? I want to understand your thought process when you did this, rather than going with the, why did you do that? How could you have done that? And all of those phrases, because that would just, make them close up. Thirdly, okay, I've mentioned that already. Tolerating silence and the short answers, because availability matters more than an instant detail. So you are trying to build that bond, and in building something, it takes a while. You're not going to get that, whole script that you are expecting from your teenager immediately. However, the fact that they know that mommy can sit or daddy can sit with me for 10 minutes and we can have a 2-minute conversation, and every other person is just enjoying the silence at that point. Next time, it will stretch to 30 minutes, and they will probably open up more and speak maybe 10 minutes or 15 minutes more, because at that point in their life, they are processing so many things that we as parents and guidance don't understand. So it's just a different way of communicating than the younger one. And finally, we need to separate behavior from the relationship. Our criticisms shouldn't feel like we are withdrawing love. And this is where the attitude in listening comes in, which is acceptance. So there's something called your frame of reference. When you say you want to listen, or when you say you want to communicate with your teenager, don't we'll have to try not to bring our own frame of reference, which is our own outlook in life, what we think should happen, how we know things should go. At that point, we just need to set it aside and listen and be that listening ear that they need at that time. And when we want to speak with them, we need to separate the behavior and what it is that they've done, because criticism will not take us anywhere when we're trying to build this parent-child bond. Okay, teenagers often navigate cultural identity mostly visibly. Friendships, dress sense, slangs, they get curious about their world instead of comparing it to back home. So we need to respect and hold both cultures without either the parent or your teenager having to choose one. Next one, don't worry, I'll share most of the slides and I'll have more details in them. We need to bridge both worlds at this point. Okay, so it's a biocultural identity, helping children hold heritage and new culture together, not one instead of the other. There are just 3 strategies I'm going to live with you on how you can bridge both of the worlds together. We need to keep our home traditions alive. Okay, our traditions are in form of language, food, music, storytelling, celebrations, and all of that. It builds a stable sense of who we are. In my home, for example, we endeavor to speak our local languages to our children. In my house, it's always local food, local palettes. We hardly do so much of British food. We do more of local dishes and local food. And then my curious son is like, and he's a picky eater. He's like, what's this, mom? What is this? And then I'm telling him the story behind it, how it's made, where it's grown from, how it's planted. So all of those things help to keep your traditions alive. Secondly, normalize having 2 cultures. Reassure your children they don't have to choose one. Belonging to both is a strength and not a conflict. They are first where they come from, African, and then they are in this climate at this point, and they do need to adopt some of the cultures and practices of this place, whether we like it or not as parents. So we should normalize making them understand that you are now in a place where you have to absorb both of them simultaneously. All right. And we have to build new community too, which is the final one. Encourage friendships and local activities so children feel that they belong here as well, which is what you're doing, obviously being a part of Afri-Kindness and most of the events and activities that the team has for all parents. And yes, I'll just move on to emotional regulation in terms of confidence and identity building. Okay, so 1, I just want to rush up at this point. 1, we need to co-regulate first. A calm parent's nervous system is the most effective regulation tool. Children borrow it so they can self-regulate. Secondly, we need to praise effort, not just outcome. We can say things like, oh, you did very well. You tried in doing this. It helps to build real confidence and a growth mindset. We need to reflect back on their strengths, curious about how your child is becoming who, you envision them to become, because it nurtures a positive, secure identity. We need to validate feelings and guide their behavior. It's okay to feel angry as a parent. It's not okay to hit, actually. So we need to separate emotions from actions. And then finally, we should be able to repair after conflict. This is modeling apology, like I mentioned earlier. It shows children that the relationship and self-worth can survive imperfection. And I think this should be my second to the last slide. Yeah. And this is the local support services and resources that are available where you can find free confidential support. In this case, you don't have to navigate parenting alone. We have the Quorum Family Lives. Their contact details are here. We have Family Action Family Line. Contact details are here as well. They help with family relationship support, support and crisis text line. We have Young Minds doing amazing work. It's a parent helpline, and you're able to contact them as well. We have the NSPCC as well, which help with advice on child safety and building strong connections. And we have local family hubs around us that you can search through your council family hub, and then you can find in-person parenting programs and early help near you, and as well as Afrikindness, like I mentioned, and all the activities that will help us as parents. So now the key takeaways from this presentation before I end is to know that one, connection is protective. A strong bond is one of the most powerful things you can offer your child's mental health. Secondly, resilience is relational. It is built together through repair, not by avoiding every difficulty. 3, two cultures are a strength, and you can blend both simultaneously. Your child can belong fully to both, okay? It's an asset and it's not a divide. And finally, you don't have to do this alone. Support is available all the time. Please reach out, because it is a sign of strength and not failure. Thank you very much for the presentation.
Thank you so very much, Winnie. Honestly, that was amazing. Particularly discussing how when we move and the stresses that we face as parents, I honestly wish I had Afrikindness in this available at the time, because you don't realize how much stress you are actually under as a parent, or even the stress that your children are under navigating those kind of two separate identities between the cultural identity where they are now as well. I do have loads of questions for you at the end, but we are going to open up the question and answer period a little bit later, because we do have another speaker available for us this evening. So Dr. Terence Isaacs is also an Afrikindness volunteer. He is the mental health lead with Afrikindness, and he contributes to community-focused initiatives that support families, young people, and professionals. He is also a medical doctor that specializes in child and adolescent psychiatry, and he has over 12 years experience supporting mental health and well-being of children and young people. His work has focused on promoting mental health awareness within Black and minority communities, and he draws on both his clinical expertise and his Caribbean heritage to encourage culturally informed conversation and support. Dr. Isaacs is also a published author of You Are Your Biggest Critic. He's a spoken word poet, and he is a youth leader at Chosen Church, where he is passionate about creating safe and inclusive spaces for young people to thrive emotionally, socially, and spiritually. He's currently also engaging with Leeds Mental Health Services to support the development of culturally appropriate training materials aimed at enhancing mental health awareness and improving engagement with diverse community in public services. Dr. Terence, I am very happy to have you here with us this evening. I will also let you share your notes and your screen if you need to. And if not, I think I should be able to share from my end if you cannot get it on the screen.
Let me try first and then we'll go from there. Can everyone hear me well? Okay. So some of this I wanted to kind of talk about was, if we look at what the NSPCC kind of says, that about if we understand that attachment and emotional support, particularly from parents and caregivers, now they have significant role in how it shapes the well-being and mental health of babies. So we're talking from when children are very young as babies into childhood and adolescence. So that's very important, why parent-child bonds are so important. Also, when we add to that, that positive childhood experiences help to build healthy brains. And if we have healthy brains, we're able to adapt better to emotional difficulties or hardships in life. We're able to manage things better. On the contrary, what we call adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs, which is pretty much trauma of any kind of form. So that's abuse, that's any kind of trauma in any kind of way. That along with chronic stress then leads to an environment where children grow up in that way where they're more at risk for adverse outcomes. So that's poor academics, issues with relationships, problems with the police potentially, depending on how severe things are at, and ultimately their outlook can go down an unhelpful path. And then if we think about what they also said, that about 75% of parents of children under the age of 5 report being concerned in some regards about their children's well-being. Now, when we think about the early interventions aspect of things, foundation, they then identify what we called early strong relationships as being key for children's well-being. They're the foundations, they're the building block that they need. So adding to what Winnie said, this is why children-parent bonds are so important, why they matter. Because if we, in essence, we think about it, the bit that we do in the first 2 years of life is setting up what's going to be that child's life, pretty much. So the first 2 years of life are very critical to determine how someone, it's not the be all end all, but it has a significant role on how that infant is going to become a child, into an adolescent, into a young adult, into adult, who they're going to be. So those critical stages, what we do there are very important. I know a lot of parents will go, well, my child is not under 2, they're 17, they're 10. What do I do now? Because I'm no longer in that point. It's thinking about, now that we have access to information about what we can do to change some of the things that may be happening and how we tweaked our interactions, all isn't lost. So it's not, if you miss that first 2 years, you're doomed for life. That's not it. There's going to be aspects at every point in a child's life, any point in a human being's life, to enact some sort of change to shift the dynamics. And then I guess what I really want to talk about, maybe this is the helpful bit where we can go to the picture. And if we understand, I think Winnie has already started to explain attachment theory, but I want to look at it slightly from a circle of security. Now, if we think about this, as Winnie said, children need a secure base. So if we think about it, our home is our secure base. When you're home, you feel, ordinarily everyone should feel safe at home, which then means because we're safe at home, that empowers us to be able to go to work as adults, to go out as friends, to do all the other things that we need to do, whether it's going to church, etc., or to our faith-based group, and to do all the bits of life, because we know no matter how stressful our day is, we're going to go back home and everything is going to be fine when we're back home. It's our own little comfort bubble. So similarly, for children, their parents or their caregiver is their home. It's their secure base. So from having a secure base, it allows them to be confident, to be able to say, you know what, I want to go explore. I want to go do these things. And knowing that when I can go out into the world may be scary, but I know that I can come back home and I would be secure and I'll be fine. So that's what a secure base is, and that's what each child needs. And that's what a secure attachment is, which allows that child the opportunity to be adventurous, to explore. And they know, because they've had this done to them consistently, that when I get back home from exploring, and exploring doesn't necessarily mean, when we're talking from an emotional perspective, it means they can be upset, they can be angry, they can be happy, they can be annoyed, and they know that actually mom and dad or a caregiver is going to be able to help contain them, that no emotion that they have is going to be too big. That's from an emotional perspective, because they have this place that I can come back to that's going to be okay. But children also need security and safety. So they need people to watch over them. They need people to be excited about them. They need people to do things with them and to help them, pretty much. And then, so they need to have the opportunity to feel like I can go explore. And they also need to have the opportunities, after I've explored, I can come back home. So those two things are very important: a secure base and a safe haven. So when children don't have either a secure base or a safe haven, that then creates a difficulty where their attachments or their bonds in life with other people are going to be impacted, because there's going to be a lot of stress, there's going to be a lot of anxiety, and there's going to be a lot of difficulties in managing relationships. So that's the important bit of understanding attachment theory and why having a secure attachment with our children is going to be important. And just from a purely psychological, medical perspective, 50% of people in the world would have had a secure attachment as a child. That means half of people in the world have some sort of insecure attachment. Those may mean people where things may have happened because they didn't either have a secure base or a secure haven, where they either became really anxious, meaning they're so fearful of leaving because they're not quite sure, because people weren't predictable, that if they come back, things are going to be how they expect it to be. So we have anxiety on one end, people who attach very strong, they're scared of people leaving them or abandoning them, so they're scared to do anything, to explore. And then on the opposite end, we have avoidant. So these are people where they've grown up where they weren't seen, they weren't heard, and their thoughts are, as much as they want relationships and they want closeness, they have to learn at the early age that being close to people is going to hurt you. So they then learned, as much as I want this closeness, I can't have it because that is going to hurt me. So then you have a mixture of those two, and that's where the rest of people fit into. So things may happen in our lives that may create those aspects that may lead to that. But if we are able to create a bond that's healthy with our child as parents, that reduces the chances of that happening. And it doesn't mean, and here's a good thing about all of this, it doesn't mean if you had an insecure attachment as a child, because our parents didn't know what they were doing the best that they can in the moment, they didn't have access to all these tools and all of these things like this webinar that yourselves are being able to join. They didn't have some of that. So people can only do what they know based off of what their experiences are. It doesn't mean that someone with an insecure attachment can't then become secure. That's the beautiful thing about it. Even if we've had an insecure attachment, we can, with work, get towards being secure. And that's an important bit for us to think about. Now, moving on, just I'm conscious of time. So the other bit that I wanted to talk about is, what does it then look like when children have a secure attachment? They're able to regulate their emotions more effectively. They're able to develop healthy relationships with other people. So if we think about it, the first example that a child has of what a relationship will look like is their relationship with their parents or their caregiver. The first example a child has of what a romantic relationship may look like, it's the relationship of their parents. So if we think about how those relationships then play a role for that child as they grow up, you know, there's a saying, I don't know if in African communities this is a very similar saying, but in the Caribbean community, one of the sayings that we have is, do as I say, not as I do. The reality is, for children, they do as they see. So you can preach from now until tomorrow, but they're going to do what they see more than what you say. So if what you say don't align with what they see you're doing, they're going to follow more what you do than what you're saying. But they're then also able, if they have a secure attachment, to show more confidence, as Winnie was saying, particularly when they're navigating new situations. And their resilience is going to be even more adequate, or they're going to build that resilience muscle because they'll be able to recover quicker when they experience challenges and setbacks. Because as we know as adults, we will experience challenges and setbacks. It's not the challenges themselves and setbacks that's the issue. It's how we navigate them, how we respond to them. So a child who has that secure base or that safe haven knows that, hey, I'm really stressed right now, but I know that I'll be able to overcome this because I've had experience of navigating that, because I've had this secure base to go back to. Now, when we think about then behaviors, because one of the things that we're talking about is how does all of this impact on the behaviors you see in your children? The behavior you see in an infant versus the behavior you see in a child versus behaviors in an adolescent. Now, if we understand that children behave differently when they feel safe, connected, and understood versus when they don't. So how a child attach if it's secure, because they feel safe, they've built trust, they feel connected, and they know they're understood, their behavior is going to reflect that. Now, when their behavior seems to be a bit challenging or tricky, it's because something around safety, for example, or connection, or not being understood is occurring. And then Anne Maston is her name. She talked about something called resilience as being an ordinary magic. So sometimes we think it's this one big thing that's going to happen that's going to lead to we've overcome this big thing and that's how we became resilient. No, it's built through everyday relationships. It's built through the opportunities that children have to explore, to fail, to make mistakes, and know that, hey, mom and dad or my caregiver isn't going to punish me. And when I say punish, I'm not talking about if someone's done something that needs to be disciplined. I'm talking about that they're going to be emotionally punished, because that's what we're talking about here. Relationships are emotional in a lot of aspects and relational, that somehow this is going to impact negatively on their relationship. That is how we build resilience, by those daily, everyday opportunities to infuse that ordinary magic into things. Now, if we think about behavior itself, and in my clinic, I oftentimes have parents come in saying, my child is doing X, Y, and Z, and oftentimes I just want them to stop. And that's usually why they're there, because like, if you wouldn't be seeing me as a psychiatrist if they didn't have a difficulty requiring to see myself. And the focus is oftentimes on the behavior. And oftentimes the behavior is almost, for some families, it's being identified as it's the child. Without, if we were to zoom out from that, the behavior is actually communication. So if we can connect to behavior is communication, it helps us to then separate the behavior from the child. But if we connect the behavior, particularly unhelpful behavior, as, oh, this child is just problems, that then means we're not able to separate the behavior and what it may be communicating to the child. So if we think about it, people talk about the terrible twos. So a tantrum, for example, may be because that 2-year-old is very overwhelmed or overstimulated or is really struggling with something. That's what the tantrum is. But if we said, this child is just bad behaved with these tantrums they're throwing all the time, it leaves us with little room to fully understand what they may be communicating. That adolescent that's becoming more withdrawn could be because they're being bullied at school, or they may be depressed. But we're just saying, in colloquial terms, they're just antisocial. They want to talk to anybody. They're going through the moods, for example. But if we understand that actually, it is actually communicating that actually something is happening for that child. And that's why they're having the behavior. The child that's acting out, that is disruptive in school, could be they have ADHD. And if they're treated, they'll not be acting out. Or it could be they've experienced a lot of emotional trauma or abuse, or something is going on in sort of some of relationship that they have in some regard that's causing that. So if we view behaviors as a way of a child trying to communicate with us, and the challenge is, if we think about it even as adults, sometimes when we're struggling, we may not have all the words to be able to say, hey, you know what? I'm really stressed about X, Y, and Z right now. As adults, we may not have the words to say that in the moment. We may be short. We may be talking to people and we may not be able to respond in the way we normally would respond. We may be more irritated or irritable. But we may not recognize that the reason why I'm feeling irritable right now is because I'm actually quite stressed. However, if we're able to recognize that even as adults, if we struggle, a child whose brain is still developing may not have the words or have the language to be able to say, hey, this is why I'm doing X, Y, and Z. So in my clinic, lots of times children present with self-harm, children present with difficult behaviors, or they may be quite low and maybe suicidal. And if we understand that actually that child or young person may not have the words to say, hey, I'm really struggling and I need help, the self-harm, as much as we don't want to see it, may be the only way that they'll be able to say, hey, saying I need help is hard because I've not built the words to be able to say that, but they're actually saying it by harming themselves in that way. But if we're able to understand and tap into what the questions to ask yourself, what is this behavior trying to communicate? Then that gives us space to be able to think or sit with what that child may be trying to communicate to us by the behavior. So, as I said, if we start off by asking, what is my child trying to tell me? Then we then have to look beneath the behavior. So we look in beneath the tantrums. The tantrums, it's like we say, for example, for couples, people are never arguing about the dishes. There's something that's happening that's beneath the dishes. It may seem like we're arguing about why is the dishes in the sink, but that's not it. There's an unmet need underneath that we're really arguing about. So similarly, the behavior, the tantrum, the aggression, the what people call attention seeking or withdrawal is all an unmet need that child may not be able to have the language to communicate like we're talking right now, or I'm talking to yourselves right now. And then particularly with difficult behaviors, we need to recognize that we need to meet emotion with emotion. So we need to connect first with our child before we correct. And oftentimes it's easier to say bad behavior, let's correct it right here and there without actually connecting, because we're then doing two opposing things. Connection leads to understanding of the behavior. And then when we're more regulated, we can then do the correction. So if anything we can take away from what I'm saying, we need to connect with our children before we can correct them, so that we can understand them and they can understand why we're doing the correction, like Winnie has mentioned as well. And then, particularly for children, because they're still building their muscle of self-regulation. As Winnie said, co-regulation has to occur before self-regulation. So before they can build the skill of self-regulating, they need to, like Winnie was saying, her son being able to sit in the bath, lay in the bathtub with her, and they were both calm, is a good example of what co-regulation means, which means that as he gets older, he'll be able to realize, maybe a bath is a way that I can regulate myself if I'm feeling really stressed. Because he's had that modeled to him by mom, and they've been able to do that together. So when we think of behavior, if we look at those bits of things, what is it trying to communicate, looking beneath the surface, connecting before we correct, and co-regulating before expecting self-regulation, we'll be able to understand how we can shift that parent-child dynamic. Now, I'm going to move on quite quickly because some of these things, as I said, Winnie has already talked about. So in terms of supporting emotion regulation, as Winnie said, we need to name the emotion and then validate it. So not because we're validating someone's emotions means we agree with it. So validation doesn't mean agreement. It means you understand that that's how that person is feeling in that moment and that that's okay. Not that it's okay for what they've done, but their feelings are valid. But of course, it may be tricky if we ourselves don't know what we're feeling, or we not know how to name emotions. It's going to be hard to help our children to name emotions. So part of building with our children is for us to also understand our own feelings. So we're able to be like, well, I know when I feel this way, this is anxiety, this is happiness, this is sadness, this is anger, this is irritation. And once we're able to then name it, we can then validate it. And once we're modeling that, because that's the next important bit, is modeling healthy ways to cope with stress. So as I said, children are going to do what they see, not what you say alone. And children need predictability. Safety needs predictability. So children need predictable routines and boundaries. So it's the need that you're going to show up when you say you're going to show up, but also that your boundaries are predictable and consistent. So you can't be, okay, no TV this week because you didn't do your chores. And then next week it's like, it's fine. They're not going to learn from that. It needs to be predictable. If this is what the boundary is, this is what the boundary is every single time. And then, of course, they need encouragement to problem solve rather than, and of course, I'm not a parent as yet, so I don't know how I'm gonna do to some regard, but other than jumping in to fix, because we know better and we can solve the problems for them, sometimes what they need is that safe base of, I can figure this out, and if I need help, my parent is around to help me. As opposed to us saying, don't worry, I've got this, I'm going to fix it all for you. Because that doesn't teach them confidence, that doesn't teach them to build their resilience or to build their identity. And then when we're teaching or when we're correcting, it needs to be in a calm manner. So for example, we can infuse healthy, calming strategies. And people talk about, well, what are those? And we talk about breathing exercises and people think like, what do you mean? How can breathing be helpful? But it can. Breathing exercises can be very helpful, very calming. And there are a plethora of them. They're box breathing, where you inhale for 4 seconds, you hold for 4 seconds, you breathe out for 4 seconds, you repeat it. That's one way. There are other things that we can do. For example, thinking about using our senses. What's 5 things you can see, 4 things you can hear, 3 things you can touch, 2 things you can smell, and unless you're eating something, that's what I'm saying, 1 thing you can taste, because you may not be eating things at that point in time. But simple strategies like those, if we can teach them to our children when they're stressed, to help them to manage their emotions, it would actually be quite helpful in that regard. Now, I'm not going to go through confidence and resilience more because I feel Winnie's covered that in great detail. The only thing I'll mention in terms of resilience, there are 5 C's that we can remember: competence, confidence, connection, character, contribution, or coping. And important bit when it comes to confidence, what we want to focus on is praising effort, persistence, and problem solving. That's more helpful to our children than solely focusing how well they're achieving. So if we can praise every effort that they make, the fact that they're continuing to persist with something, that is going to be more helpful for them in the long run than simply saying, oh, You just need to achieve. You just need to achieve. You need not to achieve. We want your children to excel, but that's a journey. And every child has their own capabilities that we need to be conscious of. And then the last bit really around practical tips. I think the three that I would go with is for younger children, engage with child-led play. So if we can infuse about 10 to 15 minutes daily of child-led play, meaning you're doing something together, whether it's playing a board game, you're playing imaginary games, whatever it is that a child is leading on for at least 15 minutes a day, that helps to strengthen your connection with your child. It does it significantly. Then for your older children / adolescents, it's having conversation starters. And this helps to build emotional literacy. So thinking about open-ended questions. What is it you've been proud about today? What was been really challenging about what's the most challenging thing for you today? It helps them to be reflective, but also it gives them the language that they can use. And if we have better language, we'll be able to communicate our needs better. So we wouldn't have as much unmet needs, or we wouldn't have to use behavior to communicate the need in that regard. And the last one is about having family traditions. So the family, if we can infuse routine family traditions, for example, we have a meal together every day and no one's on their mobile phone, if children have devices to begin with, or we spend a particular time of week doing X, Y, and Z. We go for a walk, or we go to the movies, or we go to church, for example, or to a place of worship. We spend time as a family having some sort of activity that's a family ritual that the children can look forward to. This is what we do. In my family, this is something that we do always. And I think that those three, in addition to what Winnie's already mentioned, could be very helpful bits of what we can do to help build those connections in that regard. I'm conscious of time, so I'll leave it there. And I'm sure if there are any questions, we can definitely answer that. But that's as short as I possibly can put it in terms of what I wanted to cover with the time. Hope it was quite useful and helpful.
It was very, very useful, I think, and very detailed given the time frame that you had to offer us as well. I think a lot of what you reiterated that Winnie said was also very important, particularly about having a secure base and a safe haven and a circle of security for children. Like Winnie had said earlier, you can sometimes find that your children keep it together in school all day, but then they get home and that is really just them having a safe place to be themselves and to express themselves. So if any parents have any questions, please feel free to take your microphone off and you can either ask Winnie or Dr. Terence or both if you need to, or you can pop it in the chat and I will read it for you. I actually have a question for Winnie. You mentioned about box breathing, and I know Dr. Terence has gone into that very, very briefly, but I was just wondering if there are any other options to box breathing, meaning what other options do we have? I know that there's mindfulness, and just for the sake of parents, we are going to have a mindfulness session this month as well, so that we get a little bit of practical skills for ourselves as parents to support us. And we are going to have a pep talk on I believe it's the 28th of July with Dr. Vivian, and we're just going to let parents ask questions based on anything we've heard today. But what would that look like? What else can we do, Dr. Terence or Winnie, outside of box breathing and mindfulness, kind of in those moments, for those of parents that aren't familiar with what that looks like or how to do that with our children? And what do you do if you have a teenager maybe that's experienced with those things but no longer wants to try it?
Ask. Go ahead, Winnie.
This sounds more physiological, so are you sure you're not going to take this? However, I'll just try to explain. So, for grounding techniques that Dr. Torrance has spoken about, the five senses of, what you touch, five of what you touch, four, that's one technique. Your box breathing is one technique. It sometimes sounds silly. I don't really blame the teenager not wanting to participate, because sometimes when you're telling like somebody to breathe, hold it in, and then exhale, is like, oh, mom, I don't want to do this, or dad, this is cocky, I don't want to do this, or things like that. What I could explain would be walking. If you could, everybody loves to work. You just need to encourage them to get connected with nature, because when your nervous system is spiraling, having to literally touch grass would help bring you back to where you are. And we know that teenagers love to go for a walk. They would have any excuse to just even, go outside. So, find that and encourage them to do that. You could go on the walk with them. Another thing that you could do as a parent, especially if you spot signs of neurodiversity within your children, there are hidden, signals of ADHD, autism, which is really the most prevalent ones, where you see your child, for lack of better words, being restless, and you're like, you don't want to sit in a place, you don't want to do this, your child is just literally pacing around. Those are clear signs that the child needs additional support. The child might need some sensory sort of support that would help them. If you find your child steaming, if you find your child probably rocking on one particular spot, that child at that point is trying to do what his or her brain is saying, you need to calm down. When as a parent, you've had a bad day, you came back, and then to put the cherry on top of the cake, you stub your toe on the door. You know how annoying it can be, and you can just lose it at that point. But me personally, I'll find myself just saying, you know what, just breathe. Just breathe. Just leave everything, breathe. That is me, and that is my brain telling myself, you need to relax. Bring yourself back to this state of equilibrium. So for that child, what their mind might tell them is, I want to do something else than breathing. Why are you telling me to breathe? I could pants around, I could go for a walk, I could do this, I could do that. So mindfulness and wellness activities that helps regulate the nervous system doesn't have to be a one size fits all. It doesn't have to be the box breathing. It doesn't have to be the grounding techniques. It can be it could be painting. It could be karaoke. It could be listening to music. It could be anything that would bring you back to the state of calm. So that's what I would say for a parent. Your child, what they enjoy to do. Feel free to explore. Feel free to try. And then, that's what I would say.
Thank you. Thank you, Winnie. Dr. Terrance, I do have one question for you. It's my last question, I promise. You mentioned that lots of adults kind of have insecure attachments, but then there is obviously a way for us to learn and grow. But how do we really support ourselves in the meantime, particularly as different cultures are dealing with all of that stress on our own? Also, how we were raised and what we expect as adults is a lot different to what our children expect. It's also a lot different to the country that we're in. So I suppose I'm asking for any kind of practical tips in the meantime. So yes, we can learn about box breathing and mindfulness, but for those where those habits are not known or they're still learning, how do we as parents kind of support ourselves in the meantime while we're developing those new skills?
One of my favorite things to tell parents is to have grace for yourself. I think I always start with that. Have grace for yourself from the perspective of oftentimes I always like to say parents are doing the best they can with what they know. So you're doing the best you can with what you know. So have more grace for yourself that you're actually trying the best you can. Having sessions like these, I think, is what's really helpful, because if I don't know that maybe the impact I may be having on my child because of my upbringing, the cultural bits of stuff, the Gen Z, Gen Alpha generation are very different in how things were to millennials or Gen X's, etc. It's to recognize that, yes, these has impacted my life in terms of how I parent, how I relate to others, but also when I have opportunities to notice, because this is the other bit of it, and it can be tricky sometimes when you have a whole lot of going on. You're managing work, you're managing if you're in a relationship, your relationship, you're managing the children, and all life stresses combined. To then have time to notice, we'll be like, oh, this is one more work that you give me here to do here. But if we can notice the little moments, and that's what it is these everyday bits. If we can notice the little moments of when actually, hey, I've been to this webinar on parenting and how to, ensure that my relationship with my child is what I'd like it to be. Is this an opportunity for me to practice something like, hey, do I need to listen more to what my child is saying? Instead of, I can show you that I'm the adult here, do I need to take a step back? Do I need to leave the room? Do I need to go for a walk, for example? In essence, it's thinking about, if I need to interact with my child in whatever way, if I'm not calm, that is not going to go well. It is never going to go well. So it's noticing, hey, am I in a space right now where I can have a conversation with my child that it will be helpful for the both of us? And that's the noticing bit. Because if the answer is, actually, I'm not, then now is not the time to have that conversation. That is very different to if your child is about to put their hands on the stove and burn themselves. You're not going to be like, am I in a space to ensure they don't hurt themselves? You need to move. So if they're doing something that is dangerous to their well-being, and you need to act. But if it's not something that requires an immediate action to save someone's life, then am I in the space where I can properly deal with that? So that would be one of the bits that I would say, thinking about, am I in the space to do this right now? And if I'm not, then it's not something that would be helpful to begin with, while we get the tools we need to unlearn what we've learned growing up as the norm. Because to parent each generation requires a different set of skills.
Yeah. Definitely. I have a 19-year-old, a 24-year-old, and a 9 and 8-year-old. And for each of them, it is an entirely different thing that I've had to relearn every time as a parent. And then technology is advancing so fast that it's a bit like, I need a new skill set. I need to keep up with what's happening with each of them. And it feels like everything I learned as a parent is not necessarily relevant now. It's not relevant in relation to their context and their experiences. It's not relevant in terms of where we're living and our experiences as well. So thank you for that. Honestly, Winnie and Terence, you've been amazingly helpful. And for the parents, if you have any questions, please feel free to post in the chat, or if you think of it later, you can post it in our WhatsApp if you would like as well. And we will get back to you. I will be posting every day after following today, using the slides from Terence and Winnie, providing little infographics like I do every day on what this looks like. And again, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us through either Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, LinkedIn. You can find us on all the social media pages. And Bunmi has also put things in chat about upcoming events. We also, I know Winnie and Terence have spoken about children with potential additional needs. We do have a particular group in AfriKindness led by Dr. Vivian to support those families that need that specific kind of support and help. So again, please just reach out if you think you need kind of maybe relevant support to your family. But thank you to everyone that came this evening. And to everyone that has joined and listened in, and Terence and Winnie, I cannot thank you enough for all of your advice and support. And I will, of course, post in chat later the PowerPoint from everyone, the working PowerPoints that you will be able to keep on your own and get back to them. But thank you so much, everyone. And I do hope you all have a good evening.